I was just propelled forward. I mean, I wasn't at a capacity where I could work at that stage, but I had time and I had enough energy to start building a brand. So,
welcome to the Get Invested podcast, where we share conversations I've enjoyed with experts from all walks of life to uncover their secret know-how on where they invest their time, their skills and their money, and the benefits this has created. Get Invested helps you to live more, work less, and leave a legacy by investing now. Listen to the show to discover top tips on how to get started, to make the most of your investment journey, and ultimately to be living the dream. More episodes can be found on iTunes or at khgroup.com.au/get invested. Thanks for listening, and let's get invested. Welcome back to Get Invested, Freedom Fighters. How often do you find yourself saying, I have no time, I'm just too busy. Life is just so fast and furious that you're always reacting to the urgent and ignoring the important. And in the process, you ignore your needs and you don't take care of yourself. You're always opting for the quick fix. But like a frog in a slowly boiling pot, you don't realise that you are looking to do long-term harm to your health and well-being, to your mind, to your body and your soul. Time seems to control us, and we don't take conscious control of what we're feeding our minds and our body. And while we might not realise it yet, this self-denial will have long-term disastrous results. I'm sure this lack of self-care is a major contributor to our current autoimmune disease epidemic. So if you're looking to break the chain, then you're going to love today's guest. You see, over the years I've found that those that achieve the most to help others only do so after they've conquered their own life-threatening challenges. It's what separates the wheat from the chaff, as it seems to hone self-reflection, which leads to insight. It creates unwavering self-belief, and this leads to resilience and determination to make a difference. This perfectly sums up Sally Lydia Paech. Sally's a sixth-generation Kangaroo Islander who, in overcoming her own health challenges, has developed a passion to help you enjoy a balanced and sustainable state of health and well-being, both physically, nutritionally, and mentally. She has learnt that we need to nourish our body first to fuel the emotional well-being that then allows us to live productive lives and make a positive impact. And she's doing this as the founder of a very own luxury natural skincare range called OrganiQ. She knows that if you wouldn't eat it, why would you put it on your skin? And with most skincare products containing very harmful toxins, OrganiQ is poised to disrupt the global market. I first had the pleasure of meeting Sally Lydia when I was stage hosting the Australia Post Pitch Fest last year, and I was very drawn to her vulnerability and her authenticity. So you need to watch this space. And please sit back now and enjoy Sally Lydia Paech. Hi and welcome back to Get Invested. It's Bushy Martin, and today we've got the pleasure of talking to Sally Lydia Paech. I've had the honour to be on stage with Sally at the Aus Post Regional Pitch Fest last year. Was really in awe of what she's doing and what she's done. So very humbled to have a chat to Sally. Welcome aboard, Sally.
hi, Bushy.
Really good to have you here. I'm really excited about spending some time talking about yourself and what you've done and where you're heading. But a lot of people may not have heard of you and what you're doing. Can you just give us a quick rundown on who you are, what you do, and where you are heading at the moment?
All right. Well, as we know, my name's Sally Lydia Paech, and I'm an island girl. I grew up on Kangaroo Island. I'm a sixth-generation islander.
Wow.
So it's 150 years of heritage on the island, which is pretty cool and quite special. And as a result of my connection to the island and passion for health and well-being, I decided to start creating my own skincare. And the evolution of mixing products in my kitchen has come to be represented in my brand OrganiQ.
Nice.
So still staying true to some of the original formulas. Our body scrubs are pure enough to eat. And a lot of people do eat the honey scrub. But my main premise of that was using Kangaroo Island sourced ingredients where possible. And so that every ingredient has a particular property beneficial for the skin. So awesome. That's me in a nutshell.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, Kangaroo Island does have a a growing reputation as a place of purity and natural resources that are second to none. And I guess from that perspective, you're very fortunate with your ancestry and history on KI. And it's, for those who haven't been there, it's an absolutely sensational place. Sonia and I get down there as often as we can, and just love the whole feel of it. Being a country boy myself, Sally, it's a great place to spend some time. So love what you're doing in that regard. Can you tell me why you're doing what you're doing?
Well, the products came as a result of seeing a gap in the market with the business itself. But I was diagnosed a number of years ago with thyroid disorder. So I was terribly unwell.
Okay, well, can I just jumping in there?
So I've never went
heard...
back to the island.
Sorry. Sorry, just for those that don't know what that means, can you sort of tell us what that disorder is?
So I was diagnosed with hyperthyroidism, which means that your thyroid is basically working on turbo. So my body was burning out effectively. I dropped about 10 kilos in 2 weeks. Wow. Finally got a diagnosis, and it was a long period of medication and monitoring bloods to get it back to a regular pace. So your thyroid is like your engine center of your body, regulates all your hormones, which then in return regulates metabolism, your mental state as well. So that was absolutely out of whack. So I went back to the island for some rest and recuperation. I mean, getting in the water itself, because my body was burning, it was cooling, but the minerals in the sea salt. And I was starting to realize that the more that my meditation, walking on the beach, yoga, that my body was starting to calm down, and I was a lot more conscious of what I was eating and what was going on my skin. And I started doing some research into thyroid disorder. There's plenty of time when you're on KI. And noticed that a reoccurring theme was endocrine disruptors in skincare and cosmetics. So the chemicals, even in natural products, were once put on the skin, were having long-term effects on people's thyroid and other health issues. So I thought,
interesting.
Well, now I've gone a bit off track, but that was the evolution of creating these products that had the results of the products that I was using, but omitting those particular ingredients that were having that effect. So, I mean, your skin is actually your largest organ, so it breathes. And if you like a third wouldn't eat it, that's my premise, I wouldn't put it on my skin.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. If you won't eat it, don't put it on your skin. I think that's an awesome catch cry. And it's interesting. I'm the opposite to you in the context that I've got a major thyroid issue as well, which went undiagnosed for many years, in fact. And rather than my metabolism was going too slow because it took them. I was lethargic, really constantly tired. I actually thought I was suffering from chronic fatigue syndrome for many years, and kept going to the doctor and saying, no, there's something wrong here. This isn't right. They would do blood tests, and that wouldn't really. But what I didn't know and was pretty ignorant at the time was that the blood tests were so basic that it wasn't really getting down to the issues. And when they finally identified the problem, it was found that because I'd been very ambitious and career-minded and worked way too hard as a workaholic early in my career, my adrenal glands were so overactive that they effectively ate the thyroid, which meant that I didn't have any active thyroid gland operating. So I was stacking on weight. Because my metabolism actually slowed down tremendously, and even to this day, I have to monitor it very closely by what I eat. So I avoid carbs at all cost. I eat and I'm not perfect at this because I keep slipping up and getting tempted to eat things I shouldn't. But I overheat at the drop of a hat. I find it quite a challenge, and there's no doubt about it. I think a big part of that is to do with dietary impacts and the nutritional side. So it's I'd full admiration for you looking very closely at what was causing that, and then what some of the solutions are. And given that many of us, I think, are probably suffering from autoimmune type disorders and don't even know it, because of our dietary issues, the opportunity to educate people through what you're doing with organics awesome. So, what's your thoughts around that?
I agree, and it comes down to similar in that journey that there were issues going on years before the official diagnosis, and it was actually my naturopath who put me onto an integrative doctor who specialised in female hormones that we started working with bioidentical hormones.
Okay.
And it was a progression of that. But you need to find yourself in that fortunate position, as you were saying. I mean, with the pace of living and the corporate world, I mean, you've only got to look at Arianna Huffington and Thrive.
Yes.
We're not allowing the time to actually care for ourselves.
Yes.
We're treating that as a luxury, yet our health is our biggest asset, and we're not really putting in what we deserve, if that makes sense.
Totally. Well, it's I guess the best analogy I can think of off the top of my head is that it's like our health is like a battery, and if we run it down, we simply don't have the energy to do anything else. And the quality of the energy that comes from that battery is going to be totally determined on what we charge it with. So if we're charging it with the wrong stuff and we're not taking time out from the hustle and bustle, and we're not putting good quality input into that, then we're going to be running on low all the time without the opportunity to recharge. And I think the disease of our age, I've read a fantastic book recently called Margin, and it talked about the fact that we live in an age where we have no margin. So we're so busy with the urgent everything, and everything has to be instant that we end up chasing our tail, and there's no time to reflect, there's no time to recharge, there's no time to actually sit down and put together nutritional food and other things that are fundamental to what we're doing. And as a consequence, we've got a pretty sick society as a result of it, because our kids are being run over by our high-velocity good intentions, and in the pursuit of everything that we think we have to have because we see it on Instagram, we're chasing our tails without just stopping and propping, going, hold on, let's just slow it down and take some time to get back to ourselves. Is that your read of the situation, Sally?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that the thing that I find so frustrating in conversations is that concept of time as well. I don't have enough time. It's about being consciously aware of where you're allocating time.
Yes.
And I mean, something as simple as not having, time to pack the lunch, just get up 15 minutes earlier and pack that lunch, because long term, that's what's going to save you. Having conscious control of what you're putting in your body, and even that 15 minutes, if you don't have time to exercise, do that, or shift around your routine and keep it consistent. That's what's being skipped and missed. I used to nanny, so I would make sure I'd get up and practice yoga before I'd go to nannying, so that I still didn't miss out on that. That meant that I was getting up at 4:30 some mornings.
Right.
But long term, that's what kept my mental clarity and balance.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it's I admire your ability to work that out so well in the piece, Sally, and it's something that a lot more of us need to be doing in that regard. But hey, let's pivot for a minute and go back to where it all began, if we can, because what I'm interested in listening to, and I know the listeners will have an interest in as well, is your journey, and just take us through your journey, pretty much from as early as you want to, with a focus on what you've invested your time, your energy, your money, and your skills in, and why. What were the motivators? Why did you change direction if you did? Just to sort of give us an understanding of your thinking and motivation along your journey so far.
I think that it's actually recently I had this conversation about country people, and that it's not even like a philosophy, it's an inability to give up. You just don't. You're on the land, you don't. You can only control what you have in that moment. So I grew up on KI, as I said, and we had a free range. We had probably the largest free range egg business. We had about 1,500 chooks,
right.
As well as sheep and cropping.
Yep.
And when I was 3 years old, my father passed away from a stroke on the farm. And then my mum, originally being from KI, her father passed away 3 months later. So we had 3 women and 2 farms, and my mum is the nerve centre of it all.
Right.
And as far as, I don't know how she got through it. So
Amazing.
then my nana, being quite elderly at that stage, she was carer for her as well as me, 3-year-old.
Good grief.
And that resilience and grit, and it just becomes embedded in you. Giving up, and she put this to me, she said, well, giving up's not an option.
No.
You can't.
No.
And I think then that comes, so her time, her energy has always been investing in me and creating the best possible future for me.
Right.
And my hope and desire is to replicate that, and through the brand long term be able to pass that on to my customers, and for them to pass on some of those values to the greater community.
Yeah.
Flowing on from that, I think I've never steered away from investing in health. When I was so unwell, there were about 3 times when my weight dropped below 36 kilos.
Good grief! How old were you when that? What sort of age are we talking when that started to develop? So
first was about 20, so it went from 20 until about 27.
Right. And what? The thyroid exercise. It's a bit unknown science to some degree. What do you think led to that point? What was happening in your life that sort of had that outcome? Are you happy to share that with us?
Yeah, I think, and this will come back later in the track too, as to how you sort of amend those things and reset your life path. There were a lot of subsequent deeper core issues that I wasn't aware of at the time happening, and I think that it's a way as well with your health and your body. It becomes a voice.
Yes.
So, on top of the thyroid disorder and anxiety, suffering. Well, the anxiety, again, there is the biochemical causes of that, as well as those deeper seated issues. So losing father, losing grandfather so quickly.
Yes.
Also being a child of adoption. So, it's always been there.
Right. Okay, I didn't realise that.
Yeah. So that in itself, that fight and will for mum to be a parent and investing everything, particularly at that stage. I mean, it did come at a financial cost, being on the island, going through IVF in the early 80s when it was still experimental. Giving everything at every cost to be a parent. Oh,
massive. So do you mind me talking about this, the adoption subject? Because I think it's something that isn't talked about much. And the reason I've got a personal interest here, because my brother and his wife over in Margaret River adopted a beautiful Chinese girl some years ago now. She's just adorable, and she was left in a brown paper bag in a town square in remote China, and ended up in an orphanage. And my brother and his wife had been trying to have kids for years without any success whatsoever. And my brother just happened to be working in China, so he could skip over the whole adoptive hurdles that are put up in Australia and make it so difficult for loving parents to actually have that opportunity. And he sort of fought through that, and I just love what he's been doing, because Minyan, her name's Minyan, she wears little T-shirts with "Made in China," and he's videoed. It's really,
I love that.
It's really cool, and he's gone back to where it all began, and he's videoed the whole thing, and they talk quite openly about the whole exercise with Min right from the get-go. So it's a normal thing. This is just how it is. I full respect of what my brother and his wife are doing in that regard, and I just saw the challenges and the struggles that they were going through. So it's a topic that doesn't get much air, I don't believe. Are you happy to talk a little bit about your experience with that and what it meant to you and your both mothers, I guess? Can you talk a bit about that for us?
Absolutely. So where do you want me to start with that?
Whatever feels good for you, I guess.
Because I do know my biological mother now. I have a relationship with her as well.
Great. Well, there must have been some really interesting times for you. At what stage did you become aware that you're adopted? That's probably a good place to start.
Well, it was just always a conscious understanding that I was adopted. I don't actually ever think I don't feel like I was ever told. It was just there, and it turned out that after we moved around to my grandmother's end of the island when I was 8, and still my best friend today, but my best friend became the only other adopted girl on the island.
Wow.
And we're in a year apart in age, and neighbours in the sense that we live 2 k's away from one another, but we're neighbours. So we share a very, very special bond in that sense.
Of course, there'd be mutual understanding, appreciation of your respective situations, I guess. So were you friends before you realised that you were both adopted, or is it the adoption connection?
It was the same with Hayley. She was never, it was just an understanding. And then when we moved around to that end of the island and we were neighbours, and kids connect instantly. And when you've only got 9 people in your class, you're sort of friends with everyone until you really understand dynamics.
Yes.
And we did. We became best friends. And that depth of understanding and awareness and gratitude. I mean, at 8, you're not conscious of what gratitude really means, but, we're sitting on horses. I can still remember it, riding and just talking about how we see the world a little bit differently.
Yeah. Okay. So and I get there's 1,000 questions I could ask here, but I guess there's, in those very early days, you talk about the anxiety that started to develop later on, the loss of your father, and so I guess to some degree, not knowing your birth mother may have contributed to that. I'm making wild guesses here. Can you just talk a bit about that for us?
I've read a lot on that too, and believe me, and this is, we'll come back to it. What we have spent on different levels of therapy, different models of therapy, some things that seem sort of whack and way out there, but have been absolutely pivotal in changing my perception of both myself and those experiences.
Right.
Indefinitely contributed to it. And I mean, as you know, it's a considered fact too. I mean, holding on to resent and anger, the health implications of that. And,
yes.
Always the way you're perceiving the situation of not how dare she, but how could you, just give up your child and things like that.
Of course.
But, I mean, sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, of course. They'd be sitting subliminally in the back of your brain the whole time, I'm sure.
I know, and then you think, well, actually, and this is where it came to. It's like, well, no, she has really given me the best opportunity possible. Like, to think two people who desperately wanted to be parents were given the opportunity to do so, and I was given a solid and stable home, well, relatively.
Yeah.
But I'll just roll into is that all right?
Yeah.
Roll into the story of how I met her.
Yeah, please. Yeah. I'd love to hear it.
I mean, I'd been going to doctors with all these health concerns, and the most, so you would be familiar with it too. What's the genetic history? Like,
yes.
Well, I don't know. I'm adopted.
Of course.
So over answering it.
Yeah.
And we worked. I did good old Google. Really fantastic.
All right.
How to get my family history, and it turned out I had to approach Families SA, so
yep.
I did so. I just explained my history. I had to get my birth certificate and tell them who I was, and
yep.
about a month later I received a phone call and they said that I had my information that I could go and pick up, and the closing sentence though was, by the way, I should mention that you have a half-sister 2 years older than you that was also given out for adoption.
Oh, good grief. Wow, so just a one line on a piece of paper. Good grief. So have you pursued that? Because that's No,
I haven't. I think that I've always been very conscious of that too, is to not, and probably why it took me so long. I mean, Mum was never, and I'm so fortunate in that sense. I've got, two very close friends who are adopted who have never even considered doing it.
Right.
To find their birth parents, just not feeling right about it.
Okay. And does your mum feel comfortable when you decided that you really wanted to go on the search, she was supportive, yes? Or?
She supported me on every level, absolutely. So I went to the library. So I had my, they give you a little bio of your parents as well and their full names. So I went to the library, to the registry, and looked up both my biological father and mother's names and could only find my mother.
Okay.
And then in reflection, realising that she was actually from country Victoria.
Okay.
She had me in Adelaide, but what are the chances of her still living here? And she was, and that's how I found her information.
Good grief.
Skip forward, I think it was about I made written contact and it never really got anywhere. It was just backwards and forwards and fluffy conversation. So I gave up and I sent her a letter and I just said, I can't do this. You know, it's like a boy stringing you on, you know, in the pursuit, and you think you've got it, but you don't. Just, So
yeah, be a bit of an emotional roller coaster, yeah?
Yeah. It was awful. It was just so frustrating too. And, you know, because you haven't seen her physically and you're wondering, did I pass her? I mean, we're both in the eastern Norwood area. So I'm wondering, have I ever passed her?
My goodness.
Skip forward another few months and I just woke up one day and I sent mum a text message and I said, do you want to go knock on her door? Because we had her postal residential address.
Yep.
Went to the house and the lady that was there at that time wasn't familiar with the name. And so instead of giving up, our friend close by who had a store and was familiar with my story, she had a computer in her shop.
Yep.
I remembered receiving the Eastern Courier Messenger a few months prior with a woman on the front page with her name.
Wow.
And it's a unique name, so I was certain there wouldn't be any. That was my mum on the front page, my biological mum. And so I did a Google and
awesome.
Found the issue of the Eastern Courier, read the article, found what her workplace, what the name of her business, and Googled the contact details for that and made a phone call and explained to the lady who answered who I was, and I spoke to my biological mum the next day, and then we met a week later.
Fantastic. How did that go?
Just felt completely relaxed. Really, it was really easy. And through that, I was doing a university course at the time in creative writing. So for my major piece, I wrote a feature on, you know, the 3 stories of adoption, 3 women. And their path, and that's how I found out that my mum was actually in Miss Australia when she fell pregnant with me.
Wow.
In country Victoria, and she felt that it was most sensible to come down to Adelaide. Her brother was living only a few streets away from where she was living, and she just didn't feel she could even tell him.
Wow.
She had made the decision to obviously give me up for adoption, and the only thing that she could stipulate was the faith. And so by chance, my dad being a Lutheran family, that was why mum and dad had access the opportunity to have me. So
grief. Wow.
I think that faith going around a bit, that's even though, it's strong. And something quite special. But she didn't get, and I think that reflecting on that story, you know, she didn't get to hold the baby. She just, you know,
I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine.
And that was the end of the story.
Heart-wrenching. At that time too, you know, there's the whole societal judgment thing around. It must have been a totally demoralising, alienating. You almost feel worthless, I think, the way it was treated and judged at that time, which is not that long ago, actually. So I can imagine your birth mum must have all of the emotions that she's been through over the years, the guilt, and then when you reached out to her, she's got to confront all that again. And I just don't think people really think about just how emotionally charged that situation is for all 3 of you, for you, for your birth mum, for your adoptive mum. There's just a whole bunch of stuff in there that, full admiration, Sally, for having the courage to reach out and reconnect. And what drove that? What was it that you thought, right, I really need to find out who my birth mum is? What was going on in your thinking at that time?
I think, the part of the anxiety, but also that needing to know, I'm not one that can leave doors unopened.
Right.
If there's an opportunity to find out more and find out everything possible, then I'll pursue that path. I mean, it's part of my identity as well.
Great.
So that was really it. And I mean, I'm fortunate in the sense that there hasn't been any significant negative repercussions. Mum and my biological mum met only by chance due to miscalculation with times. And the first thing my mum said to her was, "Thank you for giving us our daughter."
Wow.
And I think that's something that will stick with me forever. And since then, we've had New Year's together at our house, and my birthday a couple of years ago, where it's almost like just announcing it to everyone. So this is, our abstract, disjointed, but totally unified family.
How good's that? It's so good that both your birth mum and your adopted mum are actually comfortable with that, because some people will be quite confronted by that. And it says a lot about both of them, doesn't it?
Awesome.
Part
of my nature as well is I like bringing people together.
Right.
I don't know maybe that's a part of that collaboration. And I mean, I'll have a birthday party, but it's not to celebrate me. It's just a chance to get everyone together. So I don't think we do that enough.
Yeah.
We think that we should be so fiercely independent, and it's not always the best possible option.
Agree. I'm 100% behind you on that. We live in a world of I, and it's all about me, and all of the guru stuff that you see on all levels of media. It's all about the hero, but the hero comes with a team. I don't know anyone who's achieved any form of success, however you define what success is, because success is different to every single person. But I'll take my own example, Sally. Without Sonia and our partnership as life partners and business partners, there's no way we would be enjoying the lifestyle we now are. And I couldn't have done it by myself, and I wouldn't have done it by myself. So, when people sometimes say, "Oh, you've done really well," I said, "No, we've done really well," and it's because of that knowledge that the power in partnership is sensational from a connection and relationship perspective. So it's, again, full admiration to you in recognising how important that is. And clearly your adopted mum has been a massive supporter of what you're doing with OrganiQ. And I'm sure without her, again, it would be a lonely and probably a more challenging journey, yeah?
Yeah, most definitely. Oh, most definitely, yeah.
She's a rock. I mean, the little bit you've said about what she's been through and how she managed to keep the farm afloat, look after you and look after her mother. Good grief, that takes some amazing resilience. And you're right. Being a country boy myself, I often say that if you're born and bred in the country, you come with a value set that is often quite different to those that have been brought up in a metropolitan fraternity. And it's probably why I gravitate towards the country and country people to some degree. I find myself, even working and what we're doing right across the board, it's not always evident, but it comes out in the conversation that quite often those people were born and bred in the country, and it's probably why I feel most comfortable in that regard. So you're pretty blessed with KI. It's a great fraternity in that regard. Awesome. Okay. Well, look. So we've got to that point. You were feeling, and you obviously left KI to go to school in Adelaide.
Yeah, I came up to school in year 10. Most kids, if finances permit, then they will go to Adelaide for high school. It's just the level of opportunities and also the academic capabilities. It's a far...
Sure.
Yeah.
So you boarded somewhere?
And then that's another abstract story. I lived with family friends, so through the generations, I'll put that one out there too. My grandmother was a nanny in the Adelaide Hills for an old Adelaide family.
Okay.
She was from the Adelaide Hills. She was a nanny for an old Adelaide family, and during the polio virus, they had a beach house on Kangaroo Island, so they sent her and the sons over there, and she met the neighbouring farmer and fell in love and got married and moved over to Kangaroo Island.
Right.
And through the history and being Kangaroo Island and that community spirit, Mum grew up with the kids of those boys and so forth. And so when it came time for me to come to school, her closest friend of that generation said, well, no, Sally's going to come and live with us. She doesn't need to board. Judy already had 8 kids plus an exchange student. What's one more?
Wow.
So I lived with them, which was definitely a culture shock coming from just Mum and I to that household. But just, again, that unity and connection and family values was huge. So, yes. Finished my last 3 years at Walford, which was great, and I still followed the same routine as my friends who were boarding. So on the exit weekends, I'd still catch the bus and boat back to KI with them.
Yeah.
So
okay.
yeah.
Okay. So when did the anxiety really kick? Because it feels to me that a lot of this search and the thyroid issues were anxiety driven. Clearly, when did that sort of start to really evidence itself? And then what did you do?
Most definitely, as soon as I got to school, I think it was a lot more conscious, and I knew that things were feeling different and that nervousness. And you get that homesickness feeling, but it's not conventional homesickness.
Yeah, right.
So by then it was well ingrained. I was quite unwell by the end of year 12. I actually submitted my final English assignment on the day that it was due, not into SACE, but due into SABSA not due into the school, but due into SABSA for marking.
Yep.
On the floor of my year 11 teacher's classroom, she called Mum and made me come into school to submit it. I ended up getting a 20 for English.
Wow.
So she saw something in me. But, I was quite unwell at that stage, and I know that I didn't achieve I achieved the best I could for that moment in year 12.
Yeah.
But had that interest not been there, I could have done a lot better. So, yeah.
And that's because what was going through your head and what you were feeling about all of that? Is that what was driving it?
Yeah, absolutely. And even at that stage in schools, there was only one teacher, that recognised it for what it was.
Right.
And Mum at that stage, that's one thing, being the older country values and her ability to push through everything and not maybe be as in touch with her emotions and that side.
Sure.
Took her a long time to come around to see what was really happening.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right, yeah. So, yeah, you're dead right. The country people just beaver through and bury the emotions sometimes because they just have to do. They won't allow themselves to because they'll fall over if they did to some degree. Okay, so what happened then, Sally?
So graduated, finished high school, and then I had a year off to somewhat find myself, and then went to uni. And I knew that I wanted to study. I think for that it was a sense of personal fulfillment, of not having a lot of self-confidence and not really believing in myself. And, oh, my gosh, I actually got to uni. I didn't even really think I'd get this far in life.
Right.
And then through studying at uni, because I didn't have high self-esteem, and teachers would comment that I was I was always good at English, but through studying found out, oh my gosh, I'm actually quite bright. Marks, I was achieving exceptional results. But then my health again started to deteriorate after my first year of study. And then that's when, looking back, and my naturopath was aware of it, it was that adrenals working at full speed 100% of the time, and the replications of that on the mind and subsequent replications on the body. It became quite messy for the next 10 years, fluctuating between those states of mind and physical health.
Of course, because it's
until
all
the official diagnosis of thyroid disorder, and a bit more of a battle after that.
Yeah, because it is a you can't separate the mind from the body, and the body is a physical reminder of what's going on in the mind to a fair degree. You mentioned that you had low self-esteem, and I'm interested in that again personally. I similarly had very low self-esteem when I was young, and I'm not sure why. I'd still question myself on why at times, but I was born with a hair lip, which wasn't bad. I had a less dramatic version of it, and I also contracted really intensely bad asthma at a very early age, so I was always undeveloped physically and much shorter and smaller than everyone else. And we moved around the country. My father was a stock agent with Dalgetty's for many years, so we would move around country towns from one to the other, and in doing so I was always 1 or 2 years younger than everyone else in the class. So I'm guessing that's where my lack of self-esteem came from, and my way of overcoming that was just to work harder than everyone else so that I could prove to everyone else and myself that I was actually worthy. And it sounds a little bit like you may have been the same. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, you are, and I think that resonated with me on a lot of levels. What you said, being on the island, you have that double level of isolation. Even though you have this incredible community spirit, but being adopted and being a single parent household, even in the early 90s, was still a bit, particularly in the country, was a bit not conventional.
Good
so
call.
yeah, it was tough. You were always slightly on the outer. And having to move in year 2 meant that I was leaving my established friendship groups and moving into already established friendship groups.
Of course.
At a really difficult age.
Yeah, at a very, very difficult age. So yeah, through uni and then beyond that, it sounds like a bit of a roller coaster ride, and then the final recognition that it was the thyroid that was the thing that was driving all
that. I think that gave us a sense of clarity and focus as well. Post that, my weight dropped again, a result of an initial weight loss and anxiety with an eating disorder that was quite recurrent.
Right.
So my weight dropped again after the diagnosis, but then that was when I went back to the island and started working on the brand and these products, and had this one conversation with a close friend that just, I don't know how or why, but it shifted things. I got back to Adelaide and I knew I wasn't ever going back to where I'd been. And I haven't stopped since. I've been moving forward the whole time.
Okay, well, let's talk about that, because that's obviously a pivotal moment. Who was it with and what was the conversation?
It was so bizarre. A close friend that I'd grown up with on the island. We'd never been close growing up. Someone that just had a different way of seeing things to a lot of people that I'd grown up with, and just an ability to help. I mean, being quite anxious, you have this need to control situations. You're not very open to breaking your routine, but had this ability to encourage me to do so. And it was, it just gave me the black and white of knowing how unwell I was. And I wasn't really, when you're in it, you don't really see it for what it is. You think you're coasting along quite fine, but, when you're actually feeling faint after walking up a hill.
Great. So are we saying anorexia or something similar? Is that what you were suffering from at the time? Are you comfortable talking about that? Yeah?
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow. And I think that's, it's always been quite a challenge not identifying, not letting the disorder represent who I am, but knowing that indefinitely that was what was going on, if that makes sense.
Totally.
And having so often in that, I think that was getting over the fact that I was punishing my body enough through that, but society in many ways almost was angry and punishing me, you know, because it's perceptually a disorder that you can control. Well, you know, just eat, or, you know, you can actually change this because it's just your body, but it's not. And that's why so many people die from it, and why I'm so fortunate to have that awareness and the ability to change my circumstances.
It takes a takes a lot of mental courage to break through that. And I guess what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Sally, but your friend probably had a very honest conversation with you and said, "Hey, you're going to kill yourself if you don't make a change here. This is where you're headed." That's a big
pretty much.
Yeah, is that pretty much what they said?
Yeah, and I think I think, and that's probably another thing you hear it so many times over. We have friends who are just supporting you, but not necessarily giving it to you black and white. Or then you go for treatment, which I did also, and you're almost punished. You're doing something wrong, so this is why you're in this program.
Yeah. It just reinforces all the bad feelings that you've had. The honesty is fantastic, but the support. Again, I don't want to go off on a massive tangent here, but what really disappoints me about our current society, and perhaps every society's been like this, is the judgment. And one of my greatest goals is to live in a world without judgment, because if we remove that, people just don't take the time to really understand what someone's going through, and it's very easy on the outside to say, "Well, just eat something. There's no issue here. Just eat something." Well, come on, they've just got no clue. And if our education system can get to a point where we can foster empathy for others, and that's every other living being, that's not just humans but animals and everything else, what a fantastic world we've got the opportunity to live in. So sorry, I'm going off on a wild tangent here, Sally, but it's something that I hold as a strong belief in terms of what our human potential is. And I think positively what we're seeing now with the recent change in legislation around the gay and lesbian fraternity, there's a growing openness that's starting to develop, and you see resistance to it obviously by the old guard to some degree, but I'm just very I guess optimistic now around the fact that people are starting to be more accepting of people's situations, and therefore we're likely to be in a more supportive environment. What's your thoughts around that?
I agree, and going back to education, I think that it's imperative that we transform the way we perceive conventional education as well, because there are so many beautiful and brilliant minds falling through the cracks, so to speak.
Yes.
Because they don't fit the norm.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely, totally agree. Unfortunately, because of the numbers, education has to accommodate the lowest common denominator, and therefore if you don't fit the mould, then you're sort of isolated to some degree. We've only got to look at the likes of Stephen Hawking and others that have, what they can achieve despite the physical challenges that they've been through. It's just a world of opportunity there if we can embrace people's potential and encourage them in that regard. So that's awesome. So coming back to the organic story then, obviously you had that conversation. That was a wake-up call. Take us through the rest of the journey until you then made the decision to get organics off the ground.
Well, that was it. I mean, I'd been on the island, and it was time I had come back to Adelaide, and I was just propelled forward. I mean, I wasn't at a capacity where I could work at that stage, but I had time and I had enough energy to start building a brand. So got back to Adelaide and creating the products and I'm an absolute addict of research on every level. It doesn't matter what it is, get me into it and I'll keep going. So looking at packaging, designing, I did all the designing myself and created a product that there was interest for and was marketable, and from that it's been a step-by-step progression. Being open and being honest and being authentically myself has led to chance conversations and chance encounters mentor relationships, progressing to friendships that have all helped in the road to growing this business.
Yeah, Brent. So how long's Organic been going now, Sally?
3 years commercially. And yeah, so we've been in supermarkets for 13 months now.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, very cool. I mean, and it's, if you look at the success rate in small business, if you've got to the 3-year mark, then that's a major achievement in itself, Sally. You mightn't think so, and it mightn't feel like it at times, because it's a very lonely and extremely challenging environment to build your own business. And I can only commend you on having the courage to do what you're doing. That there's an enormous niche there for what you're doing, and again, probably thanks to my good wife Sonia. In sort of doing the Google stalk on you in preparation for our discussion today, I looked at some of the ingredients that are part of what you're doing, and for a bloke, I use coconut oil on my face when I'm shaving, and I came to that just by experimenting, because nothing else. I got very sensitive, quite dry, and obviously I'm sort of getting on in years, so the skin's a bit of a challenge at times. And when you're an asthmatic, you're also automatically predisposed to eczema-type skin conditions.
Yes.
So the coconut oil has been a revelation for me. My skin's never felt better since I've started using it. And clearly it's a fairly core ingredient for your products, yeah?
Yeah, well, that is particularly I keep thinking the cleanse and condition product is perfect for what you're saying. Is one product that I can say literally does everything. Coconut oil is instantly soothing and conditioning. So if you've got sunburn or kitchen burns or mozzie bites, just putting on it straight away will calm it.
Yes.
And it's not an oil that leaves a residue. It soaks into your skin. And same with olive oil as well. And that's been used for centuries by the Greeks for, absolute elixir of health internally and topically. And then cangrel and honey, which, we're home to the only species of that bee in the world.
Wow.
It's antibacterial, antimicrobial. When we had the bushfires a number of years ago and the horses that were burnt, honey was the only thing that they could put on their wounds that would actually stay on there and protect it.
Wow.
So it speaks for itself. So that product, it's a shaving oil. It's for eczema, sunburn, abrasions, moisturizer, cleanser, removes makeup, does everything.
Well, there's probably, being a bloke, there's probably a massive opportunity here for your product to be promoted as a male shaving cream. Is there?
Yeah, most definitely. Yes, agreed.
I'm just thinking out loud as we're talking, because the male cosmetic exercise, while there's still the blokey bloke thing that tends to permeate a lot of Aussies, I've just sort of noticed that there is a growing desire and openness towards males starting to think more about looking after their skin and what they're doing. And I don't see too many that appear to be tapping into that, Sally, so that may be an avenue that's worth pursuing at the right time.
I agree. I think most definitely. And after a few conversations I've had in the last few days, it's a path that I want to look into. Particularly if you're buying products, well, they're gender neutral essentially, but then you've got the streams of marketing for them. So,
of course,
yeah,
of course. Okay, now something else that we haven't touched on, but I am interested to have a chat about is you've obviously, and I guess it's part of that journey you were going through in sort of discovering yourself is yoga. So can you tell us about when that came into your life, why it came into your life, and what it's done for you, and where it sits in that overall context?
Well, yoga, again, that found me essentially. It was in high school. We had a lady come to the school, year 12, you have your workshops, and all I can remember was that she came and introduced us to yoga, and something clicked, and turned to doing an IT assignment on designing an office, and I had as a suggestion for your postural health doing yoga. So the awareness was there, and my best friend and I, after finishing high school, we played around. We went to Baby 2 classes of Bikram yoga and absolutely murdered us. But I was nannying at the time, and I noticed that every morning when I was doing, because I'd do a bit of, this was my first family that I would nanny for, I would do a bit of a workout before they'd wake up, and I noticed that I was starting to incorporate some of the poses.
Right.
There was no conscious decision. They just started to come into it. And
okay.
I turned out another family that I was nannying for, they were our neighbours. She would go to a yoga class weekly, and it was walking distance from my house. So I went to the beginners class, and
okay.
that school became part of my life for a good 5 years after.
Wow.
My whole routine, and noticing that through this practice, it was Iyengar yoga, which is probably one of the best known Western forms of yoga and is quite physiological based. So
okay. Just repeat the.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just repeat the name again. I'm a novice when it comes to the yoga world.
Iyengar yoga.
How do you spell that?
Iyengar.
Okay, and that's a fairly widespread yoga discipline.
It is, and it's a traditional. When I say traditional Western form of yoga. So Mr. Iyengar in India, he wasn't given past. He was told that he wouldn't live past 12, and he lived well into his 90s. And it was probably when he was about 16, he was introduced to yoga principles, and he would invest perhaps 20 hours a day, understanding the pose at 20 hours is like obviously 2 days. So I meant 10 hours a day. Just immersing himself in the pose, in understanding how it impacted on the muscles, on the mind state, and broke down every single pose, the traditional Indian poses, and started creating sequences designed for particular ailments and body conditions.
Wow.
And through that, this style, and it's so intense, and there are handstands and back bends and head balances and ropes and hanging from the wall on ropes, and your teacher will sometimes gently adjust you, or sometimes put a leg into your shin and pull your hip back, but you understand your body and you understand how your body is changing. And it was something again that I could immerse myself in and notice the changes. And when I was so unwell that all I could really do was get out of bed and do a few poses. I would do that every day. It was one thing I would do every day.
So the specific poses that, given the, and I don't know whether the thyroid exercise had been diagnosed by then, but were there specific poses that you either gravitated to or you consciously decided to invest in that were giving you great benefits, yeah?
Yes, there was. And, my yoga school became my community, and they saw me at my absolute worst and best as well. But when the diagnosis was made official, then we were working, even if the class had a particular structure they were following, we would convert certain poses to suit me and my practice on that particular class. So, yeah.
Okay. That's what, because I'd never thought about that actually in terms of certain poses being adopted to assist with specific ailments. So it's a very personal thing in that regard, because I've been to a few yoga classes, Sally, and I felt it's never felt right. And maybe I just went to the wrong type of class with the wrong type of instructor, but because it was always very Eastern in its philosophy, and very serious, I found in the couple of times I've gone along, and I'll share a personal story here, which I found funny, but they didn't at the particular point in time. Having not been used to doing all the sorts of stretches, I made a noise and created an odour from somewhere that wasn't really appreciated, and I was rolling around on the floor thinking it was pretty funny, and everyone else was giving me the dirty eye, and I thought, clearly this isn't the place for me. But and I've probably walked away from yoga only after a couple of experiences without really giving it, its proper a chance to really dive into it. Because someone like me who's still playing field hockey and a bit of a crusty old bugger, the flexibility and everything else I've come to learn, a lot of that comes back to mindset. And if you can get yourself in a stress-free position, then the whole body tends to relax as a result, and therefore can perform a lot better on the sports field. So, from what I've read, you've certainly got some expertise in helping in that area. So, if I came to you, Sally, and I said, "Look, I've had hamstring issues for years. I tend to be very stiff anyway. What sort of a routine would you take me through, and where would that focus on? What benefits would I get from doing that?"
It's surprising, you think of the hamstrings and you think that you would need to be doing like four, your particular stretches, but it's something as simple as changing the way that you stand and how you're bending from your hips so that you're releasing the back. So your hamstrings as well. What depth you take it is that they hold on to a lot of your stress and emotion as well.
Right.
So, yeah, and I think that that's what I love about this particular practice. What it's taught me is, and what my life philosophy is nourishing and being aware of yourself on every single level because of the connection of the emotional and the mental and the physical. But yeah, I would say most definitely be working on forward bends to release the tension in your hips and then subsequently in your hamstrings.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
And what about the physiology and then the mind? Because I might have mentioned to you before, I suffer from monkey mind. I've got this chattering brain that just never shuts up. And I've tried all of the focus on your breathing and then move around your body and
I'm not a good meditator. No, I understand completely.
Yeah, it's been a real challenge, and everyone seems to be into it. And I'm going, I'm trying, but it's not working for me. You've had a similar experience from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I have, and my meditation for me, the way that I turn my brain off is by going for a walk with a podcast on, because then I can't really think.
Yes.
I'm doing so many things preventing that.
Yes.
And I'll listen to podcasts when I do yoga because I let my body do the work. And that's what I loved about yoga, and particularly this style, is because it's so physically dynamic. Even if you've got injuries, I've had people with heart surgery and even broken backs doing this style, but because it's so physically demanding, you don't have the time to have your monkey mind.
Yes.
Your body won't allow it, particularly when you're standing on one leg. But then by the time you've been working your body in such a way and you come to the closure of class, although there are 1.5 to 2 hour classes of breathing, but the breathing is so focused in such a way that your mind, again, it doesn't have the freedom to wander.
Yeah, okay. I mean, the only thing that saves me at the moment is that I play piano, and when I play piano, I just tune out from the world, and I actually get off the piano feeling totally at ease because the vibration of the music and the
music's a healing art as well.
Oh, I love it. Beautiful. Yes, yeah. If anything's going to move me emotionally as an Aussie bloke, it's music. It just sort of cuts through to me, and I get a lot out of that. So no, that's really interesting. I might follow you up and get some more details on that form of yoga, because you've opened my eyes and ears to the ability to tap into something that we can actually customise to suit the challenges that I have. So that's awesome. Okay, now let's sort of jump into the future a little bit, Sally. And I sort of wanted just you to paint a picture of what your ideal and your perfect life looks like, and then talk to me about what you're going to invest in between now and whenever that is to make that happen.
Up until only recently, the last year, I've been focusing day to day, but more and more I am becoming aware, conscious, and sometimes anxious about my future.
Right.
Long term, my vision is for this brand to grow to scale to the point that we have an external specific location for manufacturing.
Okay.
Then long term post that is the brand growth on a visionary, yes, but on a global scale.
Right.
But at the same time, we're always telling that story of the island. We're bringing people back to the island and promoting our state as a whole.
Of course.
I just want to create a brand of value for those products to be bringing genuine value and difference to the lives of others. I think also where I'm at in life, I've got my visions of meeting someone and settling down, and, then you've got a unified shared vision.
Yes.
So for now, it's that still that day by day and creating my social national awareness of this brand and growing from that.
Yeah, awesome. And the long-term vision is you still living on Kangaroo Island and enjoying life there, or is it somewhere else doing something else? What's in your head at this stage?
By nature, loving to learn and experience will be travelling, but travelling in those areas, in those themes that still reflect and bring back to the brand, to self-awareness, self-conditioning. I have a soft spot for France, always, so rural France.
Yeah, we do too.
Industry coming up there too, so there's always the...
Yes, absolutely. There's a great synergy there in what you're doing and the whole industry that's grown up there, so I can see some great fit there, and France has got to be our favourite place on earth. We just love the French and love France. It's just there's something about the French. I just love hearing the French speak. It's got to be the most romantic language on the world, don't you think?
Yes, most definitely. Good wine too.
Yes. Absolutely not. That's awesome. So, what would you be investing your time, energy, money in differently than between now and then to make that happen, Sally? Have you put any thought around that?
At the moment it's still day by day, Bushy. It's just having a clear vision on what I want and doing what is going to be most effective to achieve that. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. So what I'm hearing is that an investment in yourself in terms of that foundational nutritional health is paramount, and that you've linked that to your business in a way of taking that to the world that can help others to do that. So investing in the business is an important part of making that happen. And the reason I say that is that what I've found over the years is a lot of people who focus on income but not necessarily wealth. And what I mean by that is that they put their energy into their skills, they put their energy into their business or their career or their work, and that gives them an income. But the minute they stop doing that, so does the income, and therefore so does the lifestyle. Whereas over the years I've studied and read about and followed and I guess tried to model myself on people who in parallel with their career and their work and their personal investment have invested in things that will grow in value over time, that then eventually will replace their active income and therefore give them time back so they can do what they want when they like, and to help others in doing so. And whether that be property, whether it be shares, whether it be setting your business up so that it's saleable and scalable, so that at some point you can either get other people to take it on or sell it, and then you have more time to devote to things that are important. Have you put any thought around what, if anything, outside of investing in yourself and the business might help you in that journey?
Property, most definitely. I think that it's been the model that I've been brought up with traditionally is shares.
Right.
But I'm not comfortable with the inconsistency with that.
Sure.
And to be able to see something in bricks and understanding residential valuations, I think that it's most definitely the way to go. And I think if we go back to education, I think these are some of the mindsets and tools and understandings that should be taught a lot earlier in life.
Totally.
So that we have that understanding. Like I said, at 30, I'm only just becoming aware of how important investment is long term, particularly with the way that society is diverging and increasing financial and commercial demands on people.
Agreed.
Something you can rely on is that brick and mortar foundation.
Yeah, I absolutely, totally agree. Yeah, well, we'll talk more about that as the journey goes, because it's important for you right now to get the business to a point where it is financially sound, and then when it may already be at that point, but If not, then at that point, that's the time to. I'd say, to a lot of people that we talk to, you keep focusing on building your skills and your business, and then we'll deploy your income in parallel, almost on a remote control fashion, to build a property portfolio that will eventually replace your income and give you time back, so you then have the freedom to focus your energy on things that are really important, ongoing outside of what you're already doing. So yeah, that's good. Well, it's the most important ingredient in investing in anything I've found over the years is time, and success doesn't come quickly, despite everyone and what the media would like to try and make you think. Every single person that I've studied, read about, or whatnot, I keep coming back with the same numbers that you've got to be doing something for a minimum of 10,000 hours to be an expert. And that generally equates to 15 plus years before you really hit the top of your game and financially secure. And that's no different in property, by the way. It's an 8 to 15 year cycle. So if we start to embrace time as our friend rather than the enemy, and I think one of the biggest challenges we have as a Western society is that we equate time to money. And therefore time becomes the enemy because we're trying to make it happen way too fast. Whereas if we embrace time as our friend, and then we change our mindset to say, well, success is going to take time, so I'm just going to keep doing what I do because I know that eventually it's going to happen for me. And all sorts of growth. If you look at Einstein defined the concept of capital growth as the eighth wonder of the world, then compounding growth, if you look at this exponential curve on a graph, the big swinging arc, then 80% of the growth comes in the last 20% of the time. So, where I feel sorry for a lot of people is that they give up too early, Sally. They'll work hard for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and then go, no, this is all too hard, I'm going to give this away. And yet if they just stuck to it for a couple of more years, all of the fruits and the results and the rewards of what they put their time, energy and money into are just around the corner. So if there's one thing I would encourage you to do is stick to your knitting with OrganiQ. It's a fantastic product with a great story in a great location, and it's backed up not only by a great business brand, but your personal brand, and your story is one that inspires a lot of people. So if the one thing I'd like you to take away from our conversation today is just to keep going and keep doing it. And you've already seen the power of connection in terms of the relationships that you've built over a very short period of time. We're only talking 3 years, which in the context of anyone's business, it might feel like a long time, but it's not. So really encourage you to continue with the fantastic work that you're doing. And just if you get to a point where you're feeling challenged, and you will, and you go, well, I just don't know whether I can continue to do this, talk to people like myself and others just to give you that extra injection and motivation to know that you're actually on the right path.
Thank you, Bushy.
No, awesome. Now, I guess the only a couple of other things that I just wanted to dig into, because I'm sort of mindful that I've used up a lot of your valuable time. If there's one life-changing quote or message that you sort of live your life by, is there anything that you can share with myself and the listeners?
To be honest, I think that it hits on a lot of deeper levels, but it's something that I write to myself every day, and that is make it happen.
Yeah,
I think that, if there's a will, there's a way, and it won't always be a conventional straight path. It rarely ever is. But if you want something bad enough, you will make it happen.
Totally agree. Absolutely, totally agree. Awesome. And you've mentioned already that you're an avid podcast listener, as am I. If there were podcasts that you think the listeners should really be tuning into, what would you suggest?
Did you know that I was put onto it and I hated it because I found it so vulgar, and it's literally changed my life, and that is the Gary V audio experience. So Gary Vaynerchuk,
yes,
that man was years ahead of his time and he still is, and I listen to that most days actually. That's been a world of business insight. But the simple, even, I mean, I've been listening to so many interview-based podcasts. So simple things like, for my personal journey and social experience, that Osher Gunsberg and Mia Friedman, because they're interviewing perceptually everyday people, but people that are doing amazing things and making genuine contribution and difference to society on multiple levels. I think it helps you to understand that you're not so alone in the world as well.
I totally agree. I absolutely totally agree. It sort of makes it real. And I'm similar to you. I listen to all. I'm a bit of a mood podcast. So depending on how I'm feeling, on time I go searching for something that's going to give me the food that'll make me feel right in that particular area, or if I have a deficiency in knowledge, then I'll like before we started this podcast, I just went and looked at podcasts that talked about how to do a podcast. Because it was completely fresh and new to me, and still is. I'm still got an enormous amount to learn on the journey, but I just find podcasts a fantastic way to digest information in the car, in the gym, doing the household chores, you name it. It's just a brilliant way of focusing in, resting your mind, learning something new, and so awesome. It's great to talk to someone who shares those thoughts. Similarly, do you do much reading, Sally?
Yes, every day.
Okay.
Amount of business books and mindset books and
tell us
books.
Yeah, tell us the one or two that have made a massive difference to you.
Did you know that off the top of my head? I really could not tell you. But I think that on a depth of story level, and I'm big on poetry and prose and stories as well, and ones that have, not poetry though, but things that have really changed me is actually The Alchemist.
Yes. Yeah, that's a cracker.
Every time I read that, there's another key learning that I pull from it that I wasn't aware of the time prior to reading it. And again, The Power of Now is a book not dissimilar to that. Every time I pull it out, there is a new learning that comes from it. Yeah,
what do they say, Sally? They say when the student is ready, the teacher arrives, and it's similar to reading a book. There are lessons there that slip through, and then you go back, and because you're at a different point, you suddenly pick up on something that didn't appear relevant when you read it the first time round. So I'm with you. I encourage people so much just to read and reread books because the first read's not going to give them everything that is going to assist them long term. So awesome. Look, it's been absolutely sensational. For those that have listened to this, they're going to get a lot out of you being so open and honest and sharing with us, Sally. For those that do want to get in touch with you, either on Organic or do you still assist people with yoga yourself, or has that sort of been overshadowed now?
Absolutely. So
okay.
I do. My primary structure at the moment is going to people's houses so that we can do it in their own environment and help them implement a practice that they can incorporate into their everyday life.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, I know there'll be a lot of South Aussies that are keen to get into that, given I think you've certainly opened my eyes to a practice that's going to be more specific to what will work for me. So how can people contact you, Sally?
I think email's probably the easiest, and that way I can reply with something quite detailed or give them a call if that is what would suit them better. So if I give you my email address,
let's just share that, and I'll put it in the show notes as well, obviously, but just share it for us now.
No worries. Well, that's sallylydia@icloud.com.
Yeah.
And then we can go from there.
Brilliant. And what are you investing in at the moment, Sally? What are you keeping focused on currently?
Injection back into the business and sleep. Finally, after 30 years, I'm getting a structure for my sleep. So
now there's a great subject because I don't sleep either. So share with me what you're tapping into there, because this has been a lifelong struggle for me. Are there any practices that you've found that are helping you to get really good sleep?
I think also with hormones, that's been a big issue, my body not making melatonin. So putting the practices in place to help encourage my body to make that. So having only dim lighting after about 7 o'clock.
Okay.
And no televisions or screens in the bedroom.
Yep.
But also supplement with melatonin.
Right.
So that I'm getting a hit of that and a particular herbal tonic. And yeah, I think that for a short amount of time it's particular yoga poses just so that my hormones were re-regulating. And now I've started to get into a pattern and it's just working for me. So if I'm in bed and my eyes are closed and I'm not needing to get up, I'm staying there, which is making such a positive impact on my day-to-day energy levels as well.
Of course it is. Yeah, look, full hats off to you for having the self-awareness to really look at what needs to work for you. And if I sort of draw to a conclusion what I've heard along this fantastic chat we've had, Sally, I'd see you as someone who invests in yourself because you need to. That's foundational. You invest in helping people with their health and nutrition through what you're doing with organic. But more than that, underlying all of that, and if I look at your journey and where you started and where you're heading, I think you actually invest in connection because
most definitely.
Yeah, that connection that you searched for early and has now become an important part of the relationships you're building around your business is going to be fundamental. And let me just finish by saying, Sally, that you're a fantastic South Australian. You've got a sensational future. I love what you're doing with organic and bringing continued focus on Kangaroo Island, which is I think South Australia and Kangaroo Island are the best kept secrets in the country, in actual fact. And what you're doing is bringing a voice to that, and the sensory business card that you have presented through organic is just a sensational way to continue to open this beautiful part of the world to others. And I commend you on doing that and wish you all the best in the future, and look forward to staying in touch with you so that we can track your success and tune in at times to dig in deeper on some of the subjects that we've touched on today.
Thank you so much, Bushy.
Thanks, Sally. We'll talk to you again. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye. How good was that? I hope you enjoyed it. To get a summary of all the investment gold and to get a copy of the show notes, email me on hello@khgroup.com.au. That's HELLO@khgroup.com.au. Or check us out at www.khgroup.com.au/getinvested. And join me next week for another episode of the Get Invested podcast. Thanks for listening, and as always, dream as if you'll live forever and live as if you'll die tomorrow.